here we go.
Welcome to the Nine Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Nine Route Fantasy Football Podcast. We're going to talk about our Week 16 starts and sits. Little time here to go over who Pat and I think are going to be the best or worst options. Again, some of the sits, you say, hey, that's a superstar. It's not a traditional sit. It's a fade. It's a wide receiver one that's maybe closer to a flex. So relax. We're not telling you to bench Pat Mahomes. We're maybe saying that he's not going to have as strong of a day. So calm down for those. And again, the starts are usually better than expected. Some of those are the unsung heroes or the guys that, based on a matchup, based on the momentum, the way they've been playing, what we see here, we feel that these are the guys that are going to get you to that next week, or as far as we are right now, for a lot of you, for that championship week. Well, some of you may have another week or two. We do run the table in our league of record, but some other ones don't, and or points based, and there's all different variables there. So again, we're going to give you some starts and sits for week 16. Starting off at quarterback, who do you got going this week in week 16, Pat? Who do you like to win somebody a title?
Well, again, we would hope that you're not relying on all of these plays to win your semifinal, which is probably where most leagues are this week in your semifinal matchups. But if you are one of those teams who's streaming quarterbacks, I think that you could stream Joe Burrow this week versus the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are the 8th worst team to the quarterback position, and Burrow has really struggled recently, scoring 20 plus fantasy points only one time since week 9. And that happened to be the only game that he's thrown multiple touchdowns and no interceptions since then. A home game versus Baltimore is exactly what he needs to kind of get back on track. Baltimore has had just one interception in their last 7 games, and they've given up multiple passing TDs in 5 of their last 7 and 7 of their last 10 overall. So for as bad as Burrow has kind of had it recently with some of the matchups that he's gone against, Denver this past week, who's just, a powerhouse on defense, and some of the other defenses that he's faced more recently, he finally gets a little bit of a break with Baltimore. Like you said in our last episode, the last time they faced each other, I think the Bengals put 41 on the board versus the Ravens. So this could be a game and should be a game where I think Burrow sort of gets, it's a get right game for Burrow. He needs something. He needs an opponent that, and I think the Bengals are going to cede some points to the Ravens as well. I think the Ravens offense has been playing well lately, and I think this is a game where both teams should score. And I think that the Joe Burrow-led Bengals, he should pass for multiple touchdowns this week, and likely no interceptions against that depleted Baltimore Ravens defense. Who was your sit for this week, Scott? I mean, your start, excuse me.
Hey, no, absolutely. Well, prior to seeing his name end up on the COVID-19 list, see, we're trying to keep up too, folks. This is happening literally as we're doing the show. So, a lot of that 5 o'clock Monday press junket after the week is interesting. So it's unknown if Jared Goff is vaccinated or not, or if he's dealing with any symptoms. So again, I know some of these now are heavier precautions based on what's been going on the past week with all the postponements of games. I liked, at least in theory, Jared Goff against the Atlanta Falcons, who are the 31st ranked team against the quarterback position, averaging 20 points the last 4 games. That's a safe floor. And ironically, that Atlanta Falcons guarantee 20 points a game. So right there, the averages are there. Seeing how, dare I say, Detroit's looked a mite explosive on offense, a little bit. The Atlanta Falcons have given up 26 passing touchdowns, almost 70% completion to the quarterback position. So I felt, and I still feel, hopefully this is nothing and it's just, protocol situation overall, but that Jared Goff would be a start of the week against the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, again, that offense seems like they're clicking a little bit, and they had coming off a pretty nice win against the Arizona Cardinals. Who are you going to sit, Pat?
So I really struggled with my sit this week because the numbers kind of point to a sit, but I'm not really sure if I like it. But the more digging I did and the more I thought about it, the more I'm going to go ahead and sit Carson Wentz this week versus the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals overall are the fourth best team versus the quarterback position. Wentz had a good stretch from weeks 4 through 9 where he scored 20 plus fantasy points in 6 straight games. But since then, he's done it only once. The Colts have been relying on their running game a little bit more recently and Jonathan Taylor. And it's a trend that I can sort of see continuing, as I believe that Frank Reich will want to control the clock and keep the ball out of Kyler Murray's hands as much as possible, the way he did in week 15. I feel like the Colts are sort of finding their formula to win games, and it's Jonathan Taylor and play good defense. Basically, it's the old standard. Can, when the weather gets cold, can you run the ball? Can you play good defense? The Colts can do both of those things. And I think the Cardinals are going to be in for another tough day versus Indianapolis this week. They're a good team that, they're really, really strong on defense. And like I said, if they can run the ball against this Arizona team, which I think they're going to be able to do, I could see Arizona taking a second loss in a row and it being on the back of another huge Jonathan Taylor performance. I don't, unfortunately, see Wentz throwing the ball a ton against Arizona, but I do think that the Colts as a whole are going to have a good game, just not Wentz so much. What about you? Who's your sit?
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree. Well, I guess it's going to be an ugly game then, because I am all out, and I really mean as a true starter this week for a lot of reasons. Kyler Murray versus the Indianapolis Colts. They are the 17th, so they're quote unquote middle of the road against the quarterback position. Giving up about 17 points a game. They have 17 interceptions. They have not allowed a rushing touchdown to a quarterback. So in theory, the legs would be taken out there. I'll be honest. To me, it comes down to a couple things. I still don't think Kyler Murray's quite 100% healthy. Again, they had that ugly game on Monday night against the Rams, and it seems like that momentum carried over to Detroit, and they just couldn't shake it off, albeit on a quote unquote short week. To me, a lot of this comes down to play calling. I haven't had a chance to watch a lot of football, sometimes just the highlights, but I did catch a lot of the Monday night game and looked at some of the plays that were made this week and the team as a whole. And I mean, Cliff Kingsbury is an idiot. I'm sorry. The reason that team is successful is because of the skill of the players. They started the season off pretty hot because they opened up the entire playbook in the first 4 or 5 weeks and tried to run everybody off the field. And they did a pretty good job. We praised them. We said you could get the water boy or the equipment guy from that team as your starter, and he or she would get you 25 points on average. And we were right. It was happening. And then everything came back down to earth a little bit, and suddenly they had to grind out wins. Then they make a play for Zach Ertz. You're figuring, okay, missing piece. You got the tight end. Kyler Murray does go down with the high ankle sprain. Colt McCoy comes in and didn't seem like they missed too much of a beat, but it didn't seem like the same team. But watching some of his decisions and the situations he puts his team in, they shouldn't have lost, honestly, the Rams game. That's just my opinion. But again, the Rams won it. It is what it is. Seeing this game yesterday, it should have never happened. I get that there are games where maybe you're looking past Detroit and you're looking ahead to that matchup, maybe against Indianapolis, something along those lines. But with all due respect to Dan Campbell and the Lions, great win, but let alone the blowout factor, it just something about it and watching what goes on there. But that little guy, Kyler Murray, he sure tries hard. And he's starting to almost remind me of a Baker Mayfield light, where he's just running around. He has trouble seeing people. And then I know we did mention A.J. Brown as a streamer, but I even watched the interception that kind of ended the game almost for him, where, the player jumped the route for Detroit, made a nice play, but A.J. Green made no effort to go back to the ball. So I don't know what's up with that team personally, and I don't like Kyler Murray, honestly, for the rest of the season. To me, it strikes me as one of these teams that's going to fall apart, get into the playoffs, limp into the barn, and be a one and done and revisit everything and figure out who to blame. honestly. He's not Urban Meyer, don't get me wrong, but Cliff Kingsbury, I think, if Kyle Shanahan's saying, yo, dude, what are you doing with the play calling? I think that says a lot, and that's me being sarcastic. Yeah, I don't like Kyler Murray this week. I don't know if you can tell.
Yeah, it seems like you don't like him. It's like a personal attack now at this point.
Not him. Like I said, I feel bad.
No,
I feel bad. To me, it's just the coach who made it a point to bring his guy, get the guy and do all that. And, not per se that he, was directly involved, but, he knew he was the big talent coming out, and it's great, but you can't, you have running backs, you have a game. Like, again, we watch it here in Philadelphia where, they started off the season and they were just pushing with the passing game. And it was like, no, man, you got to balance it out. Keep the defenses honest, yada, yada. And again, the Eagles turned into a decent team. A lot of these teams figure out what they are. But when you just keep hitting the square pegs into round holes, bad things are going to happen. You're going to lose to Detroit. You're going to have a tough matchup against a very good defense and a team that is starting to really circle the wagons and try to get themselves poised to get into the playoffs in the Indianapolis Colts, where, you guys are 10-4 and you're thinking, well, we're going to kind of cruise a little bit. And the Rams looked like they were hurting a little bit. Now everything's coming back down to earth. The Niners almost look like the best team in the NFC. They're going to be kicking in your door sooner or later. So you better be ready for it. But I don't hate Kyler Murray. I dislike him for the rest of the year, but it's due to the coaching, not as much as the player himself. But it would help if maybe you could sit on some phone books just to get a little higher up there behind center.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the running back position. Who are you going to start at running back? I need some positivity from you now after that.
Positivity. Well, hey, man, I'm positively negative. You know what I mean? That's good stuff. We're looking at a resurgence, a renaissance. Speaking of idiot coaches, Urban Meyer is no longer among us, thank the Lord. And thankful to James Robinson of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he's going to be a solid start this week going up against the New York Football Jets, the worst team against the running back position, giving up about 28 points a game to the position. It was good to see, again, a nice first game, 17 points against Houston. No more Urban Meyer. He got it the most targets that he's seen since week 3, most red zone targets since week 6. Obviously, they realized that James Robinson is a very good running back. He had a couple fumbles. He had a bad heel that was a little banged up, and he played through it. But when a college coach is treating pro players like college players, that's a recipe for disaster, and that's part of the reason that things went the way they went. Seeing James Robinson getting back to normal, and again, playing against a team of the Jets caliber against that position, obviously, again, with Trevor Lawrence and the coaching staff looking to get him right, they're going to maybe let him lean this game. So you might see, health-wise, you might see a good 20, 25 carries maybe for James Robinson, let alone the targets are there. So I really do like him a lot this week in the matchup against the Jets, and I am very positive about that. How you feeling about running backs, Pat? Who is your start of the week?
I'm going to go with Melvin Gordon this week. I know that Javonte Williams has kind of been getting all the love in the fantasy community lately, but this backfield it's still Gordon's backfield just as much as it is Williams, as it was in the beginning of the season. They're still running pretty much the same amount of snaps. They're on the field for the same amount of snaps. They're getting the same amount of carries. And, Williams has been great. Don't get me wrong. This is not, this isn't a down on Javonte Williams take at all. This is more of the fact that I think that Melvin Gordon is still very capable of scoring fantasy points. And Denver is a top 12 rush offense in the league. Are averaging over 27 rushes per game. So that's roughly 13.5 for each guy. And then Gordon's averaging roughly 3 targets per game as well. So if you take that all into consideration, you're looking at about 16.5 touches. That's plenty of touches to produce for fantasy. I mean, you got guys like Tony Pollard, James Robinson, even earlier in the season, was producing on less than 16.5 touches a game. So I think that if Teddy Bridgewater misses this game, which it does look like as of right now, the Broncos say that they are preparing to move forward with Drew Lock as their starter this week. So, as of this moment, and we still have, obviously an entire week to play, but they don't expect to have Bridgewater back, which to me only means more rushing attempts. I don't think that the Broncos want to put their playoff hopes in the hands of Drew Lock, who I've heard playfully called Mr. Irresponsible as a nickname. He literally just, I listen, I love the fact that the guy goes out there and chucks the rock and tries to win the game, but I don't think that they're going to give him the opportunity to do that as often this week against the Raiders. It's a division matchup. It's just one of those games where the Broncos are going to have to come into Las Vegas and grind it out, run the ball, play good defense. And I think that Williams and Melvin Gordon both have decent games. And I think that Gordon is a very respectable start for your fantasy team this week in semifinals if you need a running back 2 or a flex if you have him in your flex position. So who we sitting this week? Who's your sit for the week?
Well, I think might be a little bit of, I could be wrong. I think it was a little bit of fool's gold this week, but Devin Singletary against New England. I know New England just got beat up a little bit against the Indianapolis Colts. I know there's a big run at the end of the game for Jonathan Taylor that really kind of pushed those stats and numbers overboard. And they haven't been terrific. They've been slightly below middle of the pack, stopping the running game, period, on the season, while the rest of their defense has been pretty solid. They've only given up 4 touchdowns, but at the same time, they give up about 17 points a game to the position. But Singletary just had a monster game yesterday, and it was 22 carries. It was against Carolina because Allen wasn't feeling right, as far as his leg. There was questions if he was even going to play. So obviously this was probably part of the game script going into that to, be safe, control the football, get out of there with the win. But obviously then that starts to open everything up. That's Buffalo as a whole. Is if they're able to spread the ball around and utilize the running back position ever so slightly, that's when you see them start to dominate games and win by 14 points or more, which is where I think 8 of their wins have come from most of their wins have come from almost in this entire season. Again, Singletary had a nice game, don't get me wrong, but I think after the last game you saw obviously the ground and pound from both sides, again, in a horrible weather game, and that just was what it was. I think Buffalo is going to make it a point to try to show Bill and the gang, listen, obviously that things are on a little bit different terms right now when it comes to the weather and how things are going to play out. We're going to try to establish dominance in this division. Again, you let us right back in by losing to Indianapolis. We're at home. We got Bills Mafia ready to go. So I think they want to light them up a little bit in the secondary and just kind of flex. Again, Zach Moss, we hardly knew you. I still don't know what that's all about. Maybe we never will until he gets released. And Matt Breida was going to be a thing for a minute, and Singletary has just kind of been around. But it's good to see that he's still involved. But I don't see him having maybe as strong a week as he was last week. Borderline flex, maybe a 10-pointer, 12-pointer, but I don't see him dominating to a fantasy title. I think Buffalo takes to the air to try to show up Big Bad Bill in Buffalo with the Bills.
There's a lot of Bills going on there.
Yeah, even one in the league, right? Doing pretty good. Pretty good so far. Not bad. It's that first year one-hit wonder. I think back in the day we had somebody join the league, didn't we? And I think their first year, because you end up getting the lion's share of picks and you walk into a decent situation. But he's made some good moves and adjusted accordingly, all kidding aside. So we're glad to have him on board. And ironically, Bill is a Bills fan. So it's just, it's like Inception. It's just never ending, really. It's just nonstop.
It's like looking in that hall of mirrors where you just you see yourself forever.
Yep. Just him, just chilling, him. Yeah.
With this Bills jersey on.
With the Bills jersey, doing what Bill does best. Absolutely.
Well, good luck. Bill's in a heated battle here. I think he needs some help from Hunter Renfrow to shore up his playoff win this week. We'll see how that goes. I know that it doesn't look like Renfro's doing a whole lot, so we'll check on that at the end of the podcast here. But
yeah, that's a tough one. I want both. No offense to anybody in the league. I want to I want to say that up front. But again, I know I said it before. I want to see DJ because I know he's been so close. He's been a lot of like bridesmaid type of thing, never the bride. And he didn't deserve a couple of the bad beats he got. But to see Bill also right in there, it just sucks one of them has to go down this week. And like you said, yeah, Renfrow, Josh Jacobs is piling on some points. It's not looking good. But, hey, still got some game to play. So we'll see how it goes. Good luck to both of you. Good luck to everybody.
All right. So for my sit this week, I'm going to go with Myles Gaskin versus the New Orleans Saints.
Because of Duke Johnson, right?
Honestly, yes.
Yeah. Can I pick him back up in my lab?
Right.
I'll take a mulligan.
But the Dolphins, honestly, this year have, Gaskin has disappeared. This isn't the first time he's been active and not, really performed well or even touched the ball a lot. The Dolphins are a really tough team to pin down as far as running back usage. I know that, they leaned on Malcolm Brown a few games earlier in the season for whatever reason. I'm not really sure. I feel like they just don't like Gaskin. I think the coaching staff just maybe feels like he's just too small, or I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Preseason, I was all over him. They were like, "Oh, he's going to be a three. He's going to be a McCaffrey and Antonio Gibson." And I was like, "Okay." And then I drafted him, and it was just mild usage. And they're throwing Malcolm Brown in there. Like you said, it's just, do you not trust him? Is there something wrong? Because when you give him the football, he's not bad.
Yeah, that's what we're going to call him from now on. Mild Gaskin.
Oh, well done. Well done.
So this past week, Gaskin was active. Now, it's possible he was on the COVID list. It's possible he had, some symptoms or, maybe just didn't feel 100%. And maybe that's why Duke Johnson got all these touches. I'm not really sure. But what I do know is that they signed Duke Johnson to the active roster immediately, basically after the day after the game this morning. They obviously liked what he did. He ran extremely hard. I mean, I don't know if you watched any of that game, but Johnson was fighting for every inch like his career depended on it. And it did. I mean, the guy's been bounced around from place to place. This is what, his 5th or 6th team that he's been on in, the past 6 or 7 years. So I think that, Johnson's really trying hard to land in a spot where he can get some playing time. And again, for whatever reason, Miami doesn't seem to really care too much for Myles Gaskin. I think is going to be willing to give Duke Johnson a few more carries. So mixed with the fact that they're going against the New Orleans Saints, who are the second best team versus the running back position, even if Gaskin was getting all of the work, I don't know how much I'd really want to play him. But now going against the Saints and possibly losing some carries to Duke Johnson moving forward, he's just a guy that, going into my semifinal match, I just don't have the confidence to put him in my lineup. That's just all there is to it. When you're playing in the fantasy playoffs, you need guys that you are at least confident they're going to touch the ball. And I don't have confidence that Myles Gaskin gets more than, what did he get last week? 10 touches. I don't have much confidence that he gets many more touches than that. And even if he does, I don't necessarily know what he's going to do with them against a really tough Saints defense who just shut out the number 1 scoring team in the entire league. So I'm going to sit Mild Gaskin this week versus the Saints.
Oh, man. If you could only get spicy or
Fuego.
Fuego, yeah, right. Can I sign a waiver to start Mild Gaskin? Am I allowed to do that? I don't know. A glass of milk. All right. Well, I unfortunately I get what you're saying. Yeah, it just seems like they're going to start sharing the rock
like crackheads.
Oh wow.
All right, so let's move on to wide receivers.
All right.
Who's your wide receiver start?
My wide receiver is not a crackhead. He is Russell Gage. Yeah, buddy. I don't have him on any of my teams, unfortunately, but based on my prognostication, and I will stick to my guns, I still feel that Russell Gage will be fantasy football MVP when it comes down to winning your league. The guy you picked up, bye week fill in, yada, yada. He's been sitting on a bench all season. My wide receivers went down. I had to throw him in. Whatever reason this guy is in your lineup, at the end of the season, you're going to be donating to his charity. You're going to be loving him. You're going to be going, man, maybe I should keep him for next season. Oh, what's the ADP on Russell Gage going into 2022? Yeah, he's I think the health factor, which was a small issue this season, and just seeing him kind of given the opportunity to, like you said, Pat, earlier, hey, we got nobody. So it's all you, buddy. You want to go out there and tear him up. I think defenses are trying to play Kyle Pitts pretty tough because of the physicality and the fact that, albeit a tight end, he is still a rookie, but the physical concepts, they want to stay on top of him. Cordarrelle Patterson was taken out of the game by the Niners pretty much, which I think helped Gage as well. So I think playing off of each other is one thing where you have that Swiss Army knife guy out of the backfield that's drawing a lot of attention. If it's freeing up Gage for one-on-ones and ways to beat his zone, he's been in the league for a couple of years. He's not a kid. But at the same time, I do really feel like this week, his matchup against Detroit, it's a tough one. I mean, they're top 12 against the position. But just looking at some of the stats, these last 4 weeks, he's been averaging close to 20 points a game. What else we got? We got 36 targets over the last 4 weeks alone. I mean, these are numbers that, again, it's the volume. It's sometimes the best player on a bad team. Look at Brandon Cooks. Even some of his floor games are 14, 15 points. They just run the whole offense through a guy like that, or maybe a guy or two, and it gives you a pretty good opportunity to succeed. I will die on the Russell Gage Hill for the rest of the season. He is my start of the week at wide receiver.
We just pencil him in for the rest of the season for you?
Absolutely. Yes, he is next week. Yep.
Right. So we'll skip your start of the week next week at wide receiver.
Put it on a board.
It'll just say C Russell Gage.
Yep.
I'm going to start. Speaking of going back to the well, I'm going to start Brandon Aiyuk again this week versus the Tennessee Titans. Aiyuk let me down last week, but I'm starting him again to show my belief was not misplaced. I think that the process was correct. I just think that the game plan, happened to fall away from Aiyuk, and he just didn't get the opportunities to do anything versus Atlanta last week. He picked up just one catch on 2 targets for 32 yards. I think by the time the Atlanta Falcons missed the second 4th and goal, the game was pretty much over. And at that point, the Niners were just running the ball, pretty much 3 out of 4 plays, and you weren't really seeing a whole lot. I think Jimmy G only had 24 pass attempts in that entire game, and they put 31 points on the board. So it just wasn't one of those games. I do think this game's going to be a little bit different against Tennessee. I think San Francisco is going to need to throw the ball more in this game. Tennessee's the number 1 team versus the running back position in fantasy football, and they are 32 versus the wide receiver position. So it just goes to show that the way to beat the Tennessee Titans is obviously through the air. And as much as the San Francisco 49ers want to run the ball, I believe that they're going to have to throw a little bit more than maybe they're comfortable with. I think that, again, this is one of the reasons why I suggested Jimmy Garoppolo in the streaming part of our last podcast, because I think that this is one of those games where they're going to need to pass a little bit more. Garoppolo is going to be relied upon a little bit more. And I think that, obviously with more pass attempts comes more targets, and with more targets, I think Aiyuk, obviously, being probably the number 2 target on that team. I mean, recently it's been Kittle 1 and Aiyuk 2, but, Aiyuk being the second target on that team, I think he could see probably 8 to 10 targets this week, and could go somewhere around 6 for 85 and a touchdown, somewhere in that neighborhood. I think is a pretty decent chance that Aiyuk has a really good week this week versus Tennessee.
Better hope. Yeah, I mean, again, I was beginning of the season, I was a little hesitant on Debo. Wasn't sure, he had some ups and downs, and Aiyuk seemed in the doghouse, and it seemed like he came back. Debo was out. He was they're spreading it around a little bit, but he's definitely got the ability. I mean, it's there. I think, they just got to start feeding him the ball a little bit more, and do the jet sweeps and things like that to help balance stuff out. So yeah, I don't think you're far away from seeing him and the Laviska Shenaults, those guys that are of that ilk to kind of hit that next level. It would be nice, definitely. So who are you sitting this week?
So it's funny. We just talked about him not having a great game, and I think there's going to be more not great games in store for Hunter Renfrow versus the Denver Broncos next week. The Broncos are the 10th best team versus the wide receiver position. Their defense has just been outstanding recently, and it's amazing that the defense has been as good as they have been. considering how little their offense does to give them any support. Now, they do run the ball on offense, which takes some time off of the clock. It gives their defensive rest, which is nice. But the Denver Broncos just do not put up points, and they kind of leave everything to their defense to, hey, man, keep this team under 14 so we have a shot at winning, basically, is I think their philosophy. The defense has to play well, like I said, in order for them to have a chance. And I do expect them to have a chance, and I actually do expect them to go into Las Vegas and beat the Raiders this week. And I think in order to do that, they have to take away the Raiders' number one pass catching weapon, which has been Hunter Renfrow so far this year. So as you can see, the Browns are doing it tonight, at least so far through the game. And I think the Denver Broncos are going to sort of put most of their eggs into that basket of stopping Renfrow. And I think that they're going to get it done because I think they're talented enough on defense to pretty much stop whoever they want. Honestly, I mean, if you look at this past week against Cincinnati, I think T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, who, obviously are the two guys that you worry about most on Cincinnati's offense, I think they combined for like 2 catches. Like, I think they had 1 catch each. Don't quote me on that. I'm not looking at the stats, but I do remember looking at it thinking, wow, like that Denver is no joke. So I'm going to go ahead and sit Renfrow next week if I have a slightly better option even. What about you? Who you sitting?
So for my wide receiver sit this week, Pat, I'm not expecting the same output as he has done recently. I kind of feel like Brandon Cooks is walking into a bit of a buzzsaw this week. It's a tough matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers. They are the 4th toughest against the wide receiver position. They give up a lot of points on the ground. I know Brandon Cooks was, as of right now, the 2nd best wide receiver in fantasy football this week, but still a few games to play. And again, he's been the one trick pony for that team, but he's had some games where he's been shut down. And again, I think teams know that obviously Texans aren't hard to beat, but one way is to take him away, take him out of the game. So I feel like that the Chargers will be willing to fight the good fight against the run with, again, the likes of like Royce Freeman and Rex Burkhead and David Johnson and people like that. So at the end of the day, I think Brandon Cooks has a pedestrian day, could be single digits, especially coming off of 2 hot and heavy games, but definitely is a fade, flexible, maybe a wide receiver 2 this week.
What about your start at tight end? Let's get into tight ends. Who are you starting this week?
No problem getting into tight ends. We are going to go with, I did mention him as my pickup, and I said, for the waiver wire and streams, I mentioned his name and I said you'd hear it again. CJ Uzomah. I'm going to play the favorites here. I like what he did last time against the Baltimore Ravens. Put up a 24 burger on them, a couple of touchdowns. I think the Ravens are reeling. It's a tough division game. They are going to be looking to put all their eggs in the basket of trying to stop Chase, trying to stop Higgins, trying to stop maybe even Tyler Boyd. If Mixon doesn't play, could make for a little bit of an easier time for him. But at the end of the day, seeing what they're willing to give up to that tight end position, and they are a bottom feeder versus the position. They're one of the 10 worst against the tight end. So I do like a repeat of CJ Uzomah again against the Baltimore Ravens. He lit them up last time for 24 points. Double digits is a lock. The Ravens give up automatically 10 points to the position. I see him around 15. I think it could be a tight end 8, tight end 9, maybe 7. But I think he's got top 10 tight end potential for the week, and that's what you might need to get you to that chip.
Agreed. I think my tight end start of the week has possibly number 1 overall tight end potential this week, and that's the reason that I picked him. He's not really what you would consider a streamer, but I included him on here because he was a guy who was on the waiver wire earlier in the season. After he got traded to the Cardinals, he sort of became a little bit more of a stable tight end that you could probably start every week. But there's a good chance that you have. I actually have Zach Ertz on one of my rosters and have another pretty solid tight end on that roster as well. So I included him this week because I think that if you have him, there's a good chance that you have another player that you're potentially thinking about maybe starting over Zach Ertz. But I think that is a terrible play this week. I think Ertz going up against the Indianapolis Colts, who are the second worst team versus the tight end position. I think that he is going to play a huge role in this game. The Colts are really good against other positions, against a wide receiver position, against a running back position. They're really bad. Obviously, second worst against the tight end position. With DeAndre Hopkins out, I don't think, as much as we talked about AJ Green in our waiver wire pickups, I don't think AJ Green has what it takes to be a number one wide receiver anymore to take on number one cornerbacks and beat them on a regular basis. I do, however, think that Zach Ertz has what it takes to still be a number one tight end. I believe that he still had that skill and ability when he played for Philadelphia. And I think he still has it now here in Arizona. The Colts give up about 17 PPR points per game to the tight end position. And I just see Ertz being involved heavily in double-digit targets in this game, potentially 2 touchdowns. I really do believe that there's a good shot that Zach Ertz could be the number one overall tight end this week versus Indianapolis. So I was very confident about it. I normally won't pick a guy who, is sort of a consensus starter already. But like I said, I actually looked at my roster for week 16 and thought, I think I got Freiermuth and Ertz and, kind of wondering where to go. And once I started digging into the research, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going with Ertz.
Yeah. Most important catch in Eagles history. And it's going to be weird too, seeing him on the same field as Wentz on opposing teams. That's going to be a lot of tears, a lot of broing out. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's crazy. No, I like the call, definitely.
A lot of thank God we got out of there, man.
Yeah, right. You see what could you imagine playing for Nick? No, man, can't. They're too busy grabbing Carson Wentz's junk. But how about okay? So that's your start at tight end. Who don't you like? Who do you putting the fade on for tight end this week?
Well, the guy that I picked to start this week, week 15, who still hasn't even played yet. So I'm already cursing him for the next week. But like I said, these are matchup plays. So I'm going to go with Tyler Higbee next week, versus Minnesota. Minnesota is the 9th best team to the tight end position. They average a total of 103 fantasy points per game given up, but only 9.9 of those fantasy points on average go to the tight end position. So they're giving up a ton to wide receivers, to quarterbacks, to running backs, but for whatever reason, I don't know if it's easy to throw downfield on their corners. So teams don't necessarily have to look at the tight ends underneath. But if you're talking about the Rams, they have a ton of downfield weapons. Tyler Higbee is not by any means a first, probably 3 options on that offense. So he's a guy who can potentially be sort of forgotten about. I think in certain matchups, he's very important to them. But in some matchups, I just think that he's a guy who, with all the other talent on that team, he can just be a guy who, kind of gets overlooked in the offensive, game plan and offensive scheme of things. And I think against Minnesota, who gives up a lot of points to wide receivers, but not many to tight ends, I think this is one of those games where you could see Sean McVay game planning for, a lot of confusing deep routes with Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham Jr., and just sort of taking advantage of those 3 wide receivers and not really playing a whole lot on Tyler Higbee. So I would advise against starting Higbee week 16 versus the Vikings. What about you? Who are you sitting?
Well, after watching the Sunday night massacre of Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, but seeing how the Saints have kind of righted the ship defensively, I'm not looking forward to Mike Gesicki this week against the New Orleans Saints. They're a top 10 defense against the tight end position. They've only given up 3 touchdowns all season, only about 5 or 6 points a game. Gesicki as a whole, I know he may have carried people here, but here's something to figure on. He's got a tough matchup this week against the New Orleans Saints. They're about ninth against the tight end. Then next week he goes against Tennessee. They're sixth against the tight end. And he gets to finish the season against the New England Patriots, who are the best against the tight end. You can't trade him. You probably just bench him. I feel like you're going to have to find a better matchup, not just for this week, but for the weeks to come for him. And I know he's been a player that has really carried you in some weeks based on him and Tua clicking. Again, he has had some ups and downs, but he's had some pretty solid games, and he has been one of the better tight ends as a whole throughout the season. And I mean, that we've seen that kind of coming slowly but surely, but he's been a top 10 most of the season. And unfortunately, I think that his kind of train's starting to run out of gas. And again, looking at these matchups, I just see a little bit of a fizzle. So I think with some of the names we mentioned for streamers, we'll definitely get you through this week. Don't like Mike Gesicki this week against New Orleans. And a little bit word of caution, he's got a rough road ahead the last couple of weeks if you have him involved in any further playoff action.
Yeah, I think with Devontae Parker back, Tua tends to look to his wide receivers first. And that's just, maybe his style of play or whatever.
And Waddle just got off the list, I saw too. So yeah.
Yeah, so he'll be back, and you'll have, his.
You got Duke Johnson. You're good.
Of course.
Nobody's touching the football again. Get the hell out of here. Ain't gonna be weak sauce Gaskin. That's for sure.
Weak sauce.
Yes, sir.
All right. So what about defenses? Let's get into our defensive start sets. Who are you starting?
All right. Well, I mean, they've been a very good defense throughout the season. I kind of like the matchup again. Some of this is based on the concepts of a short week. The Green Bay Packers are going to have the Cleveland Browns this week, who, I mean, I'm looking right now on Monday Night Football. They're Nick Mullins is going to beat the Raiders. That's one, hey, 2021 NFL, good luck. But at the same time, to see that they're going to be in a short week. Green Bay's riding that momentum and looking to try to secure every type of home field advantage and bye. And, Cleveland's also obviously a playoff caliber team, and they're doing their best to stick around and do what needs to be done. But I mean, at the end of the day, it strikes me as, I think for a lot of these teams, and this is my vibe or my feeling towards everything, is that as much as Cleveland's going to fight to make the playoffs, Green Bay's tops, and they're checking in on everybody coming towards them hard and hot and heavy. But that short week, Green Bay going against Cleveland, I think that they beat them up pretty hard this week. How about you, Pat? Who you start?
Well, like I said in our last episode, I am starting the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Houston Texans. The Texans are the fourth worst team to the defense special teams in fantasy. And just to quickly recap what I said, in case you didn't listen to the last episode, I think that the Chargers, with their really good pass defense and their high-powered scoring offense, I think if they can get out of the gate quickly in this game and put some points on the board and force Houston to feel like they are in catch-up mode early and having to throw the ball as early as possible, I think that plays right into the hands of their defense. I think that Davis Mills, being a rookie quarterback, while he's been pretty impressive so far, I think rookie quarterbacks can be rattled. And I think that, if he's forced to throw the ball, 45 plus times in a game where the Chargers are scoring some points, that just leads to potential turnovers, potential, interception returns for touchdowns. And I just really think that the Chargers are going to have their way with the Texans this week, unfortunately.
I believe that is true, sir.
So what about our sits? Who are you going to sit for this week on the defensive side?
Well, gonna go on the same, like I said, the COVID short week train. I am not a big fan of the Los Angeles Rams this week, going up against the Minnesota Vikings. The Rams have had a reasonable defense. They've leaked a little bit, even though they added Von Miller and did a few nice things. They 18 points combined in the last 2 weeks going against Jacksonville, and again that Monday night beat up on the Arizona Cardinals. They have a game Tuesday because of rescheduling against Seattle. Tough division game. and then they go on the road for 2 and then finish in San Fran for the season. So again, you're going to have a quick turnaround going on the road after being home against Seattle. And Captain Kirk and his offense are tough. They may not win the games, but they put up 30 points just by walking on the field. It's very hard for defense. They're the second best offense, again, to keep defenses from scoring points, the Minnesota Vikings. So they put up points, touchdowns, yards. The overall amount of offense that they put up really does kind of mute a lot of the defenses that go up against them. They haven't had too many of those games. So I do not like the Rams, again, on a short week, on this level, going up against the Minnesota Vikings offense. And finally, Pat, who is riding the pine on defense for you this week?
Well, I'm picking a defense that, I mean, it's fairly obvious, I guess, but it's been a defense. It's the number one defense in fantasy football right now. So maybe it's not that obvious, but I think that, again, in these spots, I think you can find a better spot start, a better matchup start than the New England Patriots versus the Buffalo Bills. We talked a little bit about this game in our last episode, and you and I both agree that I think Buffalo is, I don't want to say embarrassed, but I think that Buffalo, there's a lot of players in that Buffalo locker room who believe if the weather was not as bad as it was that first game in New England, that they probably would have won that game. And they still could have and should have maybe came back and won that game at the end there. I think with a, more reasonable weather situation, I think that the Buffalo Bills passing offense is going to just let loose. New England's pass defense has been outstanding. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that, I think Buffalo is just going to have their way with them, but I do think that Buffalo is going to score some points. And I do think that Josh Allen does not turn the ball over a lot. The Buffalo Bills don't turn the ball over a lot. So this is going to be one of those games where New England isn't really going to have a ton of opportunities to score points defensively. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe New England's defense is just that good and, really puts it to the Bills, even in a non-hurricane situation. But I just feel like the Bills have, since that last game, have circled this game on their calendar and are probably more excited to play this game than they have been any game in recent history, maybe since the AFC Championship game last year. So I see the Bills really bringing their A game and really putting it to New England. And I actually believe that the Bills are going to win this game at home.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way too. I mean, again, it gets them right back in for the playoff push and to take over that division, which right now New England is 9-5 and sitting in second in the AFC. That's great, but if Buffalo wins that game, suddenly everything probably jumps around, and again, that's a big shuffle of the deck. With the AFC is very interesting. Yeah, you have 10-4 Kansas City, New England and Tennessee at 9-5, and then 8-6 all the way to Baltimore. Shocker. Just outside the playoff picture. And again, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Miami, Denver, even the Raiders, who look like they are going to possibly lose tonight to Cleveland. Again, so you have a lot of teams involved there, but Buffalo, I think, wants to kind of put their foot on the throat, so to speak. I think you're 100% on that, Pat.
Yeah, I think Buffalo has to win this game. I mean, they'll probably still make the playoffs if they don't, but if they want any shot at winning this division, they have to win this game, because if they go down to New England 2-0 in the head-to-head, that means they have to have a full game better record than them.
Yeah.
And that's just not going to be mathematically possible unless New England loses out for the rest of the season. So it's just, I don't think that this is, I think that Buffalo knows that this game is for the division.
Yeah. With all that parity, and you got the Steelers lurking with that tie that, if they get involved near the 7 seed and somebody's hanging on, they could push with that. Oh, it wasn't a loss.
Yeah.
We've seen that happen before and bump somebody like that. Yeah. And it would be major disappointment for Buffalo if they were to go from, preseason darling to, out of the playoffs. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. If New England wins that game and then Miami wins, their game this week, which, is possible. The Saints aren't great. They're not terrible, but I mean, now you're looking at a tie between Buffalo and Miami in the division, and they'll have the same division record, the same conference record. I mean, it's going to be, a team that we thought, most people thought in Buffalo, going to the AFC Championship game last year, that was destined for greatness now all of a sudden is tied for second in their own division. I don't know, man. I think Buffalo's coming with it this week, and this is going to be a super fun game to watch. So, any alibis? Anything you want to throw in here before we sign off for the night? And
nah, I mean, just watching the end of this game here while we're chatting, and I think everybody is going to be ready for. You got to be ready by now. Again, you know what got you here. Again, keep saying it. You know what got you here. We're giving you our ideas of who we think might be that guy to take you just a little bit further over the top at a specific position, maybe where you have some questions, things like that. So at the end of the day, I think everybody needs to, do their best, listen to what we're telling you, some good research that we're doing here. And again, we've hopefully gotten you through maybe a couple weeks, gotten you in a position to be around for a semifinal or a championship. And if that's the case, we appreciate you listening. We hope everybody here has a safe and happy holiday. Obviously for those out there, but next time we catch up with you, it'll be post-Christmas. And for a lot of folks that will have been a wrap, but there will still be maybe a little life left for some of you out there. So folks, enjoy the holidays. And again, best of luck the rest of this week for week 15, as well as week 16, as we're going forward in the playoffs, folks. Pat, how about you?
No, I just want to say the same thing, kind of Merry Christmas, happy holidays for those who don't celebrate Christmas. But yeah, hopefully most of you will be back with us next week and be here for the championship week or the championship run the last couple of weeks here. And we're gonna stick with you all the way through week 18 and possibly even after week 18 we'll probably have a podcast or two throughout the off season just to kind of keep our minds on football, keep our minds on fantasy, and make sure that we're paying attention to all the off season signings and things like that. So, but for this week, like Scott said, best of luck. We hope to see you in the championship week next week. And until then,
peace.
We'd like to sincerely thank you for listening to the show. You can follow us on Twitter at the 9route1 and at Scott from Delco. We put out a lot of funny and informative information on there. Our email address, if you'd like to email the show, is the 9routeFFB@gmail.com. Make sure to click the little plus wherever you're listening to follow the show. And if you like what we do, please leave us a review. Good luck this week, and we'll be back next week with more fantasy football info to take your team deep here on the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast.